This is good, these guys, because we got a newer camera there too. That does work.
Good morning and welcome to this regular meeting of the Pipestone County Commissioners. It is 9 o'clock, November 13th. Serving today, we've got Commissioner Luke Johnson, Commissioner Chris Hollingsworth, Commissioner Bruce Koyman, Commissioner Les Nath, also our County Administrator, Steve Ewing, and our County HR Coordinator, Kathy Feste. If you'd all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Also remind you that these proceedings are recorded and shown both on the county's website, and now we've got the ability to uplink them to YouTube through Facebook as well. So you all received a copy of the agenda in your packets, and also there was a copy posted, and there also was one online as well. If you had a chance to look through the agenda, are there any additions or corrections?
Mr. Chairman, a couple of additions here. Under Item 4, approval of consent agenda, we have 2 auditors warrants I would like to include with this. One Tyler just brought down from Sea Change. This is for mail balloting. Total amount of the invoice is $1,591.78. $1,591.78 to Sea Change for outgoing mail ballots, quantity 2,100. Then also I have an auditor's warrant for Department of Transportation Financial Operations for annual electrical service for $300, and that is for the Holland Armor Tower site at 1824 180th Avenue. And reason we're getting billed for that is we have equipment in there. Specifically, the Holland repeater is operated out of that armor tower, so that's our share of the cost for that. So I'd like to add those 2 auditors warrants, please.
Very well. And we make that reimbursement back to DOT, not to the utility company, apparently.
Goes to DOT. They pay the bills and they're reimbursing back to DOT.
Okay, Steve.
And if that's okay, also, if I may add, Sheriff Riemann asked at 9:20 when he comes down if he could add discussion about replacing the K9 dog in 2019. So if we could add that to it, that would be great. And at the bottom under upcoming meetings, we've already decided that December 25th is Christmas, and so we're meeting on Wednesday the 26th. Commissioner Koyman also brought up January 1st is also on as a holiday as well. So recommend changing the meeting to January 2nd if that's agreeable with the board.
Very good. Thank you, Steve. Any other additions or corrections? Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay, second. Moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
And opposed, the same. Thank you. Okay. Then, going into the consent agenda, we have got first the approval of the minutes from our November 6th meeting, our commissioners' warrants and meal reimbursements, so we've received a copy of that, treasurer's report for October of 18, also the auditor warrants from November 9th with the 2 additions that Steve just added, the $1,591.78 for Sea Chain for the elections, and also the $300 reimbursement to DOT. In addition to that, we've got the hospital warrants for $492,393.35. Is there action on the auditor's warrant?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Or the consent agenda? Okay. Moved and seconded on the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? The same. Thank you. Passes. Okay. Susan Hoskins, the director of the Pipestone County Museum, is here today. Susan, if you'd please come forward. You've got an annual report for us. We'd like to welcome you here.
Okay, I'll pass them out. Thank you.
Thanks for allowing me to report. I normally do my annual report to the county. Do I need this? In the fall. We do our, for the Historical Society, we do our annual meeting, and I the annual report is done in February. So we're a little off here, but I do have, I do always try to forward you all a copy of our annual report. And here I have a little bit to update on for what we've been doing at the museum. We, in 2017, which is our full last final year, we had guests in the museum from 41 states plus Puerto Rico, and we had guests from 13 foreign countries: Canada, Mexico, Russia, and Brazil, Czech Republic, Denmark, France, Germany, Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. And we do keep track of that. When guests come in, we ask them to sign our guest book, and it's just kind of fun to know that all these foreign visitors are coming to Pipestone, Minnesota, and visiting the museum here. Of course, the majority of our visitors are from Minnesota and South Dakota, which is what you would expect, and then Iowa, Wisconsin, and Nebraska. So those are the visitors that we're getting. We do keep track of our attendance in 4 different areas. We track them as they come in the door. We do track 2 different kinds of programming that we provide, whether we do host programs in the museum, and then when we go out to groups and give programs, and then we also track research requests. In 2017, our cost per visitor was $17.50, which is actually one of the lowest in the area for museums, and I do call around and check on that. We raise 50% of the budget on our own through memberships, donations, and fundraising. And for example, one fundraiser we just completed was our Holiday Fair Craft and Vendor Show. We hold 2 of those per year. We also do rummage sales where the public donates items for us to sell in a rummage, which is great. And another way we raise funds is that we continue to be the box office for the Performing Arts Center and do their ticketing. I did want to, well, first I'll say we do have 4 exhibit galleries in the museum, and I'm sure that you all know that. We have a new exhibit that just opened up on quilts, and that'll be up for the coming year. And we have a new exhibit gallery in the works, and that is the dining room of the Masonic Hall. And that's been one of our big projects, was to the Masonic Hall, Ferris Grand Block's historic name for the building. It adjoins the museum, and so we put a doorway through. So we're able to secure the Masonic Lodge room separately, so we can do separate tours. It is a secure area, and the new gallery space will just be in the dining room addition of that building. And we intend to keep, it's actually it would be a great programming space if we had elevator access to that area, which is, of course, in the future. We plan to bring, we keep a lot of our objects in storage, which is museum practice. You don't usually have all of your objects out all of the time, but I know that the public would like for us to have more of our objects out, and we plan to bring more things out of storage and exhibit them in the dining room in displays around the perimeter of the room. And so we've been working towards that. I also did just want to mention that longtime museum staff, Betty McCabe, left us at the end of June, and we recently hired a new part-time museum aide, Kathy Fritz. So we are now back up to full staff. We've been part staff here over the summer. It was hard to keep up there, but we're back to full staff, and Kathy will specifically be focusing on educational programming. So we really hope to be able to expand our outreach to the public. One other thing we do is District Number 3 Schoolhouse at Moore Park is open in the summer. We do monthly programs at Ridgeview and Good Sam, and we do programming for a lot of other community groups on request. And so we really hope to be able to present more public programming in 2019 with this dedicated position. We've been working on our new exhibit space, the dining room. It's very exciting. So it's also, a lot of aspects to that project. So we did, in 2018, We put the double doors in, and we had to, the elevation's a little bit off, so we had to put a step platform in there also. And those have been carpeted. And then we also hope to paint the dining room. It's been years since it's been painted, so in order to ready it for the public exhibit gallery, we'll be painting the walls and the ceiling. We had a little bit of repair to do on the ceiling due to a past leak. That's all fixed in that building. And then in 2019, we want to be able to, we'll be doing that, painting and getting that ready. We'd also like to carpet the Gallery 3, which is the room the doorway is in the museum side, because the stairs are carpeted and the platform. It would become a much better space if the entire floor was carpeted. So that's the project that we're working on. And we estimated the cost of the project at $10,000, and we were asking the county to fund $2,000 of that. We've asked the same of the city of Pipestone, and the remaining $6,000 will be raised by the Historical Society through our means, donations, fundraising, that type of thing. We have been doing quite a bit. We haven't had any large projects with our buildings this year, as we're still coming off of the large project we did on the museum building. But that is in the future. Also in 2019, we'll be looking at some more large grants to do some rehabilitation work on the Ferris Grand Block, which is the Masonic Hall. We believe it needs some tuck pointing. And that's probably the first step.
Susan, you'd mentioned the cost ratio of $17 per visitor. Could you explain the formula you used to come up with that?
Yes. I actually have that all here. So, and that's actually been pretty consistent over the years here. The cost per visitor is found using the total visitor count that we have, and the total year-end budget number. And so I've actually called around, talked to my husband in Sioux Falls at the Siouxland Heritage Museum, and even though their budget is much larger, their cost per visitor is about the same. And comparing to other museums in the area, that's pretty low. It's just an interesting number to have.
To see what your bang for the buck is, and that's really is nice. Also on that too, I appreciate that you talked about some of the other things that the museum does, some of the other, how they contribute to the community. It's not just visitors coming there, but the research that you do, your outreach program. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on some of the specifics of those?
Sure. The museum holds the collection and I believe in trust for the public. So we do have rules in place for the public to use the records, but they are for them to use. So when we get research requests, we do a lot of genealogy type requests. People email or write or call. A lot of people just will stop in and we'll help them out at that time. We also get a lot of subject requests, whether they're wanting to look, they just bought this house and they want to know what they can find out about their property, or events that they remember happened a number of years ago, if we could find it in the newspaper. And we do hold the Pipestone County Star on microfilm from 1880, and we have it all the way up until we keep the present day newspapers today. So we have quite a resource there. We also have a number of other newspapers in the county as well. And those including on microfilm, we have the Jasper Journal, we have the Edgerton Enterprise, and we have the Pipestone Leader, which was defunct in the 1940s, but it was quite a source early on. We also, I believe it's important, a lot of people don't, maybe they're not comfortable or they haven't been to the museum, they don't know what we have there, so it's important for us to go out to the public. And when we do that, we have monthly programs at Ridgeview and Good Sam, and any other community groups that request a program, we maybe go to their meeting and give a program. we hope to really be able to do more of that type of thing with our new position.
Can the papers be searched on the computer at the museum?
We keep an index for marriage, birth, and obituary records. Otherwise, you really need to have some idea of the date. They're not like database searchable at this point.
Will that ever occur? Or?
Well, from 2008 on, we are getting digital copy of the Pipestone County Star, and that is a little more searchable. Currently, you need to be on the page, and then you can search a name. So you still need to have some idea of a date.
It'd be nice if it got to the point though where you could just search a name for all the records.
It would be nice, yes. I agree.
Sounds like another ArcaSearch project.
I was just thinking the exact same thing.
That would do it. It's
For the county records, we're looking at a software program where you can do
Okay.
that type of search.
specifically starting with commissioners' minutes, going back to
That
the
would be great,
dawn of the county.
yeah.
Could you also tell us a little bit more about your organization as far as your board structure? I understand you've got is it called an advisory board, or you've got,
Well, we do have the board. They are actually approving things.
and they're made up then of,
We have 9 board members, and then we do have a person that sits on from the Jasper County Historical Society, so we do have some contact there.
how are these board members selected then to serve on your board?
Well, we do have an election at our annual meeting, and if anybody is interested, please let myself or one of the board members know, and we can pursue it.
Anybody else have any questions for Susan at all, or anything more to add, Susan?
Well, I'm more than happy to come and let you know what we're doing. I do also do a kind of a quarterly report, and I hope you're getting those. I've been forwarding them to you, so I'll keep you informed, and also on our newsletter list, so you know what we're up to.
Then I guess specifically then, like I said, the funding request. So currently, we're funding, the county is funding the museum at $36,000.
Yes.
So you're asking an increase then for the next year for 2019 then
That's right.
of $2,000 to bring it to $38,000.
Yes.
Steve, where are we at with the budget? What figure did we use when we did our budget study?
It's the same level as was put in the budget was last year,
Okay,
of 36.
so if we were to do this, we would have to do it now before we adopt the final budget,
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
Okay. And the procedure for that would take a specific, would that take a specific motion from this board to approve the increase that level? Or what's the norm been here?
If you're gonna increase their budget, we'd want to reduce it from someplace else since we already have a preliminary levy set,
Not to exceed.
not to exceed. So if
Can't go up.
you add to, we got to take away somewhere.
Right. Yeah.
It's not an insurmountable amount. If the board chooses to do that, we can locate that, I'm sure. So, but we just can't increase the levy from the 5.91 we
No,
certified
because
back
we'd
in.
set that back in September, I think is when we set that, when we first started the discussions.
Correct.
So, okay. Well, and I hope Susan understands the difficulties of that. Certainly is a good cause, and we do appreciate, again, what you've done for the community and again, keeping the cost down to $17 per visitor. But what are the feelings of the board? I think it'd be pretty difficult to take money away from something else.
I think for the amount it is, we can probably find a way to squeeze it in.
Do some looking.
You think we can do? Okay. So then we need specific action on that now, so we need to do that in the form of a motion at this meeting?
That would be good.
Okay.
You want to do that, let's do it as a motion.
I would make that motion. Maybe
Okay,
increase to 38,000.
okay, so the motion and the second is to increase their funding from $36,000 to $38,000, increase $2,000. And then the belief or the.
When we work on the budget, we'll make sure we
can
take
do-
that into account. and-
Yep. Okay. Any further discussion or questions? Okay. Okay. All in favor of the motion? Aye?
Aye.
And opposed, the same?
Aye.
Okay. Passes 4-1.
Well, thank you. We do appreciate the county's support and anything that we can do. Any projects, let me know.
Good. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda then is Sheriff Keith Reeman and also Buffalo Ridge Task Force discussion.
Morning, Chairman.
Welcome, Sheriff.
Morning.
And Deputy Edison, thank you.
First thing we're here for, Buffalo Ridge Task Force has a financial agent, and it's always been Worthington, City of Worthington, for the last, 12 years?
Since 2006, I
Since it
believe.
started, anyway. They've always done it. What it entails is they get the grant money in, and then they disperse the checks according to the commander. Well, this year, this first year, the commander is no longer from Worthington, and they kind of want to step aside from doing that because they don't have a commander in charge.
Yeah. Did that individual retire or move to a different profession, or?
He's just back on the road.
Okay,
He's
so he's still with the department down there?
He's still with Worthington, he's just
Okay.
not the commander anymore, so. And the new commanders right now is from Murray County.
Okay.
So, just a transition, you know. And so what I'm here for, we've talked to Tyler, discussed a little bit with him. We're not, the chances are we're probably not gonna have it through Pipestone County. I think Worthington also last minute said they would do it for one more year as the grant goes for 3 years at a time. But next week, we have to have our memorandum of understanding to the state, and we have to know who it is for sure. So I guess I'm here to ask for permission, if we need to, would we be allowed to do that through our, it's like a half-hour a week probably, just writing the checks. Like I said, we don't know what's gonna happen, but all of a sudden, we have to have this to the state, and we have to have, so it'll probably still be Worthington for the year, but just in case something falls apart, Nobles County said they could probably do it, but just to be safe, we're all going to our boards to make sure somebody can do it, so we don't lose our funding.
Is this something that Tyler has to get involved in, or is this something you guys can deal with in the sheriff's department? Is that,
We really talked to Tyler, kind of explained it, or ask him, because we don't want to just, do it if he's not willing to do it. The Edison probably knows more about the bills and stuff. It's not
Yeah, it'd be the task force submitting, just like the sheriff's office would, for payment for checks to be cut. We would rely on Tyler and his team there to keep track of all the finances for us as a group for the task force.
the task force would get audited. Tyler wouldn't. All he is an agent to
Right.
cut the checks. But like I said, the grant money's got to come somewhere, and then somebody's got to send it back out. So I guess I'm just asking permission, if, maybe a letter of approval, if we need to, like I said, because by next week, we'll have to know for the next year.
So we're talking 2020 then, because 2019 is
No,
going to,
it'd be for 2019.
It would be 20.
We think Worthington's going to do it for one more year. They weren't going to. At the last minute, they said, yeah, we'll do it one more year but if they decide all of a sudden not to, then we got to have Plan B or Plan C in place.
is this a calendar, does the fiscal year coincide with the calendar year? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd move to approve the request to act as a fiscal agent if necessary.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded to commit to act as fiscal agent if necessary. Okay. Further discussion or questions? Tyler, I'd look for some input from you. So basically, it's going to amount to having another separate account, and from a workload standpoint, it's not going to.
We'll be able to handle it. The
Okay.
auditor's office is completely on board
Okay.
with this request from the sheriff's office.
Very good. And then the income then comes from basically grant money.
The per
capita
per
and
capita,
grant.
and then the grant money from the
Both.
state.
Okay.
All would come through here.
Very good. Any other questions, further discussion? Okay. All in favor of approving the motion to act as the fiscal agent starting next year if necessary?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, the same? Passes unanimously.
The next item, I've discussed it before, that our dog is, the dog that Dustin has is gonna retire next year. His health is, how old is he? Edison?
He's 9. By the beginning of the year, he's going to be pushing 10 years old
So
now.
he's just basically ready to retire. We've been doing some number search because it's expensive for dogs. St. Paul is 20 to 25,000. Well, Edison's been talking to her, he got his dog and got a lot better situation, we think. But, so what I'm asking for is permission to, it'll be next year, but we have to put our name in the list now to get the right dog and get it trained at the right time. And we'd like to do it in the summer next year, so Deputy Danks can cover some of them shifts that Dustin will be going to train, try to keep, keep everything covered that way. But we gotta get our name on the list now so we can start moving forward. So, and the one you're going through, where's?
So what we're looking at is North Iowa Canine, where we originally purchased Igor. And we also purchased, the task force did Sassy. And then the city of Worthington and Nobles County has also purchased dogs from him. Puts out a lot of good dogs. So we're looking at North Iowa Canine, and his price is $13,500, and that is for a fully trained patrol dog. So that would be tracking, narcotics work, fugitive apprehension, all combined, and that includes the handler training also. The only additional fee that we're going to have is a hotel fee, and that's around $1,100 to $1,200. 4-week commitment for us for training, so we're purchasing a fully trained dog, and then we send a handler down to do training one-on-one with the master trainer.
We had talked about just going with another drug dog, just a drug dog, but boy, that other the tracking part, the apprehension part, searching buildings, it's all our deputies really would like another dog for that purpose, and it's a good tool to have.
I was going to ask maybe for a little more background on this, because again, I understand from previous discussions, as you just alluded to, there are differences in the types of dogs, the way they're trained. So the history we've had, so we've had 3 dogs so far through the years. Yep. And we've had some that have been.
Sassy.
Sassy was the 4th one.
Yeah.
And we've had some that have been just strictly drug enforcement dogs, and others have been trained in the tracking.
The only one that's been strictly drugs is Edison's.
Yep.
Sassy. The other 3 have all been fully trained.
Yep.
Patrol dogs.
So it certainly makes sense to have a dog that's trained in both.
Right. And a couple different kinds of dogs we could pick from, but
Yeah.
It is in the budget for next year. I know the budgets are all tight, but I think it's one of them. We've talked a lot with Dustin, because it's a big commitment for a deputy to do this. You got to train every day, and we're hoping 6-7 years. He's totally on board with it and really wants to do it. So.
Well, I think, yes, please.
I'm just curious, can they track like explosives?
These dogs would not. You can train that in addition, but these dogs would be tracking fugitive article recovery. So if someone were to throw a gun or a knife, they could go find that
Based on the
off the scent
smell
and the
of
odor.
Yeah.
Somebody walks away from Good Sam,
Right.
where they went into the field or something. I mean,
Yeah.
they could do that.
Okay.
People tracking would be the main thing for that part of it.
When a dog retires, is that dog just retired, or are they kind of kept as a reserve?
No, once they're
For 6 months or a year?
Because there's so much training
Okay,
involved.
they're
Once
just
they're retired.
As long as they're not current, then they're out of the picture.
Yep.
Because the dog has to be recertified through the years, too.
Right,
correct?
every year.
Yep,
Right.
every year.
Right.
And I think that they certainly have proven their effectiveness for us. They've been a very valuable asset for us. And like I said, it's
It's the preventative part of it.
right, yep.
Just the deterrent of the community, knowing that we have these dogs available, what they can do.
And last week, we were down in Edgerton School, we've been in Pipestone School, we go to New Life. There's a lot of things we do with them that don't hit the headlines, but we use them for a lot
Yep.
of different things like that.
Well, and you mentioned the schools, also an outreach for the younger students. Isn't it a good tool? Yep. It's not just all enforcement.
You've seen that Halloween, the dog, Dustin was up to Halloween, and kids love that dog, and
Yeah.
the dog, he's just a dog when he's not working.
Yeah. So this $13,000 investment,
I'll go ahead.
13,500. So we're looking at probably getting 8-10 years out of another dog. Is
Yeah,
that
so
kind of normal
the
life?
recommendation is to run the dog till they're about 8 to 10 years old. So depending on the age of the dog, they're usually that 1 to 2 years old, and we get them. They're fully trained, and then we can work them for 6 to 8 years, hopefully,
It
depending on their
depends
health
the
and
dog,
everything.
Like a deputy. I mean, the German Shepherds have a big problem with their hips.
Oh, okay.
So we're kind of going away from German Shepherds. A lot of people are, because their It's just,
So what breed of dog is more effective now?
What we'd look for is like a Belgian Malinois, which what Sassy is, or a Dutch Shepherd, something like that. Just to stay away from the German Shepherd and the problems with their hips, their backs.
Thank you. Les?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we move ahead with this.
Okay.
Get our name on the pot.
Very good.
I'll second it.
And moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Yes, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this has been discussion over last year or so with law enforcement liaison committee, and the number of that we've been throwing out is $20,000 to $25,000 previously. So to
Yep, it's in your budget and so forth. so-
opportunity like this, yeah, we need to jump.
Yep, I think it's been a very effective program as well, so. Okay. Any further questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, the same. Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you for your good work with the K-9 units and also your good work in general. We appreciate you.
Thanks.
Okay. Next on the agenda then, we've got a discussion about Finance Committee. So Tyler, you're here. If you'd come forward, please.
Mr. Chairman, Treasurer Weeds is unable to attend this morning. He's playing organ at a funeral down in Jasper this morning.
Okay.
So he said he was unable to be. We've pushed this back. This will be our third time. Just figured we'll just bring Tyler down and have the discussion you guys are planning on, and
Okay. Very good.
bring Steve in on this one, bring him up to speed on it.
I'm essentially here to answer any questions you guys have, so.
Open it up for discussion, and there's some ideas of what we could do with finance. So who'd like to lead this off?
I guess I can. I think it was just the thought that, when we do start getting new wind turbine money to pay back the, whatever we are spending on demo of Central School, that it be limited to, basically what would be considered the Pipestone portion of the new money versus the rest of the county. Because, between road projects and other projects, we've spent more than our share in the city here. And I think we need to, take note of the fact that there's obviously going to be needs in other areas of the county as well, whether it be in tax forfeited properties or road projects or whatever. And just to be able to have money available for, those other areas as well. So I guess, and I got one other thing we have to keep in mind is that when they replace the wind turbines next year between Holland and Ruth, then depending on if they take them all offline initially and then replace them, or if they do a piecemeal, we cannot lower the amount that we're using for levy reduction currently without putting ourselves in a pretty tough spot. So, we may be looking at a year down the line, depending on how, like typically when we get our wind production tax, are we getting like the money from the previous year?
Yes, it's all based on the previous year because it's based strictly off of production. It doesn't matter how much energy a given field or given tower can produce. It's dependent on exactly how much it actually produced in the year prior.
Right,
We
so
don't
the
get that
money
money
we
until
received
August.
this year was actually for
Last year.
2017
Correct.
production.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, at some point, maybe it will be a couple of years down the line then, but depending on how they replace the existing turbines, we may have to rely on the new ones that are being put up now to make up for the fact that, the ones that they replace next year might be down. And if we end up with basically a wash and we're at the same amount, we might be waiting another year to actually have any extra money per se. But whenever the extra money does come, I guess I'd like to see it limited to, approximately 43% of whatever that new total is, and then use that to pay back the demo costs. And with the rest being, available to be used in other areas of the county, was my thinking.
And my comment to that is, strictly from the accounting aspect of this, is that I can't use estimates of approximately 43%, and I would need an actual set list of what those funds could be used in the other parts of the county. And it can't just be basic infrastructure. I need to know, is that good for sidewalks? Is that good for streets? Because every dime that we get, it has to be approved by you guys, by the board. So I need to have a very firm list of what you guys would want that money to be used. And also for the accounting aspect of it, would this, when you say used in other areas of the county, are you saying that we would spend it directly, or would it be a reimbursement driven? Would these cities and townships go out and spend this money, and then they would ask us for reimbursement? Because, I mean, the accounting side of it is going to be a headache.
A designated account or something, and where, say, the board could take either applications or requests from various
Request.
entities, and then we could look at them on a case-by-case basis as far as what we,
If that's what you guys want. So yeah, that means that every request that I get, I would have to bring in front of the board then.
yeah, it's just an idea, I don't know.
Right, no, I'm just saying, we're just
possibly,
talking here.
yeah.
Right, exactly. So I mean, because it'd be very hard for me to do it personally in our office, keeping track of, if we're doing it all directly, I wouldn't want to do that. If you're going to do some type of reimbursement, any of those requests would obviously have to be approved by the board.
Right,
So we would have to, like you said, they're gonna have to have some type of request form, and then they're gonna have to fill out exactly what they spent that money on. Cause I mean,
or
the details.
preferably that they'd be asking before they spent the money there. That way they.
That
know
would
if
be
it
a
was
requirement
reimbursed or
from,
not.
that has to all be set up by the board. I mean, that's
Right.
why I'm saying you guys, this is gonna get very weedy if we're gonna do it this way. We have to have all of these requirements and all of these dates set in stone before we start doing it, so that we don't have a lot of gray areas. Because we
Right.
want this to be very black and white, and not, because as soon as you do it once in one place, we have to do it everywhere else.
Right,
So that's why I just want to make sure that we actually know exactly what we're passing before we start doing this stuff, because,
but I think we have a little time to.
correct,
finesse it
exactly.
because-
Yep,
Like you say, we're always getting the previous year's money.
Exactly.
We're probably, sounds like 2-3 years away from actually
Yep.
needing to have it finalized. But
correct. And I just wanted to make sure that we're all aware that this is how detailed this is going to be. We can't just do a very basic, this is what we want to spend on these other parts of the towns, 57%.
Right,
On these parts, well, our office needs to have a very detailed list. So I just want to make sure that I'm expressing how much I'm actually going to be needing from the board when we
And
make
part
those
of it may
decisions in the
be
future.
project-driven to a point. I mean, we don't know what,
Aren't we
Like-
thinking about, number one is blight in all the communities? and
Correct.
We all are addressing that. And of course, that's Pipestone's share is going toward that in a big way. But major projects like water sewer projects or community improvement things like Jasper's trying to fund a new emergency building, for example. I guess I could see that, things like that, community.
Okay.
Not just to give all the community workers a raise or to spend it frivolously. I'd like to see it for things
right, more
that are-
project-driven.
Yeah, infrastructure, project-driven things that benefit everybody in that community, but with an emphasis on cleaning up the town, like blight and things like that. But
I think that should be the number one thing, would be blight.
if they have an issue with something like that, that should be the, but no, like Trotsky's trying to do something with water and sewer for the last several years, and their funding is always a challenge. And I know the little bit they'll get from this probably wouldn't make the project go forward, but it could help with something, I guess you'd have to have a little bit of.
Are they making any progress on
I
that?
don't know. I don't know that they're ready to start anything yet, but,
Because that's, like you say, that's been a number of years they've been looking at that.
yeah. But there's things that come up like that all the time.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Now, my question is this the entirety of the wind tax that's going towards this fund, or are we gonna separate it like a lot of the other counties do?
I think this is just the stone rate income from.
Just stone rate money, not,
Yeah, the additional,
I feel
right.
of it, but the other one up north, I was just at a meeting this week at SRDC, and they are anticipating about $150 to $200 $1,000 increase
Just from the repowering.
from the repowering once it's up and going.
Right.
But that's totally away from this, what we're talking about.
Right, right. I think that would be just more for levy reduction in general.
Right.
Right,
That has no bearing on what we're talking about here.
correct.
But it might, like you say, there might be a glitch in the system for for 6
Where we might
months
have to
or
wait for
whatever.
a
There
year
might
or
be
something.
a dip in the production tax 1 year, well, until it gets up and going again, but.
And I think this wouldn't be ongoing when it's, or $750,000 is paid back, it would end.
Right, exactly.
It would be used for levy reductions, road improvements, and so forth.
Yeah.
I think you'd want to put a time on it, like 5 or 6 years.
Well, whatever it takes to recover the
Whatever it
funds
takes
that we
to
spent
recover.
across the
We don't
street
know
here.
exactly the number we're dealing with, so that's.
Right.
Could we maybe recap a little bit? Let's look at some history. You talk about how our wind production tax income has varied throughout the years. You know, we've had turbines now basically for 20 years. We've been receiving some of this.
Quite a while. Yep.
And again, my understanding of the history of this is when these were first developed, the wind turbine developers objected to paying property tax on the turbines because they said it was just too big of a hit because they had $1 million, $200 million, or $1 million or maybe $2 million per tower investment. So the tax revenue off of that was prohibited from them. So that's why they lobbied with the state to, instead of doing property tax, they did production tax. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Most recently then, and that has gone up and down as we've had wind develop in the county, and part of our restriction here has been our availability for transmission lines to get this wind out. So last year, basically our income was somewhere around $400,000 from wind production.
470-ish.
470-ish. And you talk about how
It is,
that
roughly.
fluctuates throughout the years. There's been years it's been greater than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely dependent on how many towers we, have out in the past. We've had several towers that have been down for a long period of time, and
Yep, that site over
we
by
definitely
Hatfield
did
sat
see a
down.
dip that year. So, I mean, it does vary between $400,000 to $500,000.
Yep.
I mean, it could be worse than that, it could be better. It just depends on how much production they actually get out of the towers. So it's completely reliant on the towers themselves, which is why the state says don't actually rely on the money, strictly because it can go down, it can go up. But more than likely, it's probably gonna go down if anything, so.
And so we've been hesitant to get too reliant on that money because of how it fluctuates.
Correct.
Also, we've heard rumblings that the state might think that they need a bigger cut of this. Is that just a perception, or is there any basis to that?
I will say, I personally haven't heard that.
Nothing.
I,
Other than the hearsay either.
correct. I mean, I've heard some hearsay, but I don't think I've heard any directly coming from any legislatures or anything I haven't seen anything actually presented to the legislature on that. Obviously, the states are always looking for ways that they can get more money, or maybe have something shift from the counties to the state. But in this particular case, I haven't seen any actual action at the state level now, as of
Rural
now.
Energy Board that I sit on, this is one of the topics of discussion that we hear quite often, is that don't get too reliant on this because the state is eyeing this as a funding mechanism for them. I don't quite understand how they could do that because, again, it stems back to the fact we're not getting property tax off of this.
Correct.
So thus far, you've been using this money has been going into the general fund, correct?
Yes, we've strictly been using it as a levy reduction tool
Yep.
up to this point, so that we don't become too reliant on it.
Okay. So then, coming up to what we currently did then with the new Stone Ray money, we've got the new site being developed in our county, and I don't recall the figures right off the top of my head, but we thought it was going to generate somewhere around $400,000 per year, because it's over 100 megawatts, if I remember right. And of course, 20% of that money goes to the township where that particular turbine is at. But the county's portion of that is going to be somewhere around 380, 400,000, something like that. Again,
Roughly.
depending on what
That's-
they actually produce. These are all projections.
Exactly. I mean, this isn't set in stone by any means, so.
Okay. So then, going back to the action that we took recently and having our discussion of how do we clean up our tax forfeited properties, and a discussion about, well, it's going to impact the levy. How are we going to, if we did it, we'd have to levy for it. So that is where the proposal came forth, that we use the new money that we haven't ever had before. This is new money. So let's designate those funds then to pay for this tax forfeited property that we've had laid on our lap. And it's unusual to have $1 million liability stuck on you. We haven't faced that before.
No.
From tax forfeiture. This is such a large one. Again, the whole idea of that tax forfeiture is that it's assumed that any property is going to have a positive value. So as it goes through the forfeit process, we sell it and so forth, it's not this huge liability. Well, in a case like this, because of the cleanup, it's a negative, it's not a positive value for the property, so it's kind of unforeseen. So that is where the proposal came forth. Let's use this new money that we hadn't anticipated getting to clean up this one-time problem so that we don't impact our property tax, our levy, because that would be a huge bump on it. And again, in light of the fact we've been warned before, don't get too dependent on this, because if we get too dependent on using it for levy reduction, the day might come that all of a sudden we're going to see a huge bump in our levy because if we lose that funding source. And
Correct.
And the action that we took, if I recall, the motion that was made and passed was to, because we had reserves, we didn't have to borrow the money to clean up our tax blighted property, our tax forfeit property, that we're going to go ahead and self-fund that, but to be able to show through transparency that we're using this new money coming in, we're going to pay ourselves back with that.
Correct.
We're anticipating 2 to 3 years payback, depending on what our actual costs are by the time we get done with
Right.
fuel tanks and what our actual income is.
Exactly, and depending on if you have 100% of that new wind production tax that we have, is that going 100% back to paying that back? It doesn't sound like that's what we're
And that was the
proposing
point,
now.
that was the point I want to make, because that is what the motion was. The motion was to use the new money from Stone.
We specifically stated at the time that we were not determining what amount of
Correct.
that we were going to use, that we were going to determine that at a later date, and hence, that's why we're having this discussion now.
Yes.
I would
We
defer
can
to
pull, we can
Steve.
pull the motion. I don't have the motion in front of me.
I think Luke's
It was-
correct. We did not decide to spend
Exactly.
100% of the money for this project.
Right.
But it wasn't actually specifically stated. I don't believe it was actually specifically stated. I'm just saying that was my understanding of, at the time we're having that discussion, that was my understanding of what the board wanted. I'm not saying that that was explicitly stated. If I remember correctly, that motion explicitly stated which funds,
You were going to pay it out of.
exactly, which funds is going to be coming out of the family services and use the recycling funds, whether that be 50/50, so on and so forth. We haven't discussed that per se, but we determined which pots of money we'll be taking out to pay for it.
Correct.
And the actual refunding, whether we're going to use 100%, so on and so forth, has not actually, the details of that have not been determined yet by the board.
Correct.
It was just my understanding at the time if that's what we wanted to do. But we can pull up the resolution and,
I would like to do that, because if I recall, I made the motion, and my intent was to use the new Stone Ray money
I don't know which one
to
it
pay
is.
back the debt. And that was the motion that was made and seconded and passed.
Well, Kathy's going to go pull that. Mr. Chairman, if I may, just looking at the math here, if we're looking at 400,000 total on Stone Ray, potentially, with 20% of that going to the townships, that knocks that down to about $320,000, correct? And at that, if we're spending, our bid is $750,000 plus engineering costs and what we might run into, you know, we're over 800,000 right now.
Correct.
So to pay that back, we're going to need at least almost
4 years.
4 years, 3.5, 4 years, depending where we're at, to pay us back for this project before we would even look at anything else at this point. I think the priority should be to get the money back here to us, and we don't know if it's going to fluctuate or not.
No.
We also don't know, like Commissioner Johnson said, what's going to happen with NextEra. How much of that money that we're generating now, that is going to be offline. We can, maybe 3 years out the road, we see that. So we have to be very careful what we do now. And we also directly use that for levy reduction. I mean, $470,000 goes a long way against our levy.
Right.
If we added that to it, our levy would be substantially higher. Basically, we're at about $69,000 per percent right now of levy is what it costs us. So it doesn't take long to move us up into double-digit levy if we were to do that, so.
But we also don't know if, you know, say if a different tax forfeited property comes up where you have a, you know, public safety issue or something, which we obviously have already had to some degree with the theater. But I mean, you know, whether it's Bowman Hall or the old school in Jasper at some point, or, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities if you look around the county. You could suddenly have something else come up where you have to address it, and then,
Mr. Chairman, again, we're far better off having a larger amount in reserve and taking on, in my opinion, these projects as a case-by-case basis, especially when you talk blight. There's always a possibility, what Auditor Reich is doing is get these things back on the tax rolls. We don't want to tear them down. We don't want to have that problem, but occasionally that can happen, so we've got to have money available to do a large project.
Yeah.
We hope Jasper continues to move forward and they do well with the school building down there. But the thought is always in the back of the mind that what could happen if the worst does happen down there in future years. We could end up with a similar situation, just like any other large older building too, in Edgerton, Jasper, any town too. 2 cents worth.
Like to elaborate on what you say as far as where some of these other potential problems could be coming from. We could have issues in the other communities as well. And that's why I think it's very, very important that we keep in mind that again, going back to Central School, this is a county problem. This is not a city problem. Because it is the county that had this tax forfeit probably laid on our laps by the state. Same thing would apply to Jasper, if there's a building in Jasper, if there's a building in Edgerton, Holland, Ruthven. It is a county problem. It's not an Edgerton problem. It's not a Ruthven problem. It's a county problem. And we need to really focus on the fact that we are all in this together, and we need to work together as a cohesive group and not be splitting hairs on, well, I don't want to spend that money because it's not in my town. That's not how we operate. And is that what I'm understanding the intent of this motion is, to split this money up by population of the communities?
There's no motion, it's just we're having a discussion, but
I think if we start splitting hairs saying, well, we can only spend 43% of that money on this project because it's in the city of Pipestone, I can't abide with that at all. Because we're all in this together. We have to work together, guys.
Mr. Chairman, the ending amended motion that came through the board starts out, Commissioner Wildermuth called for a vote on awarding the bid to DRC Inc. at a cost of $749,500 without the optional deduction of $10,000 for late finish. The funds will be taken out of existing reserves and paid back with new wind production tax, with details of where to take the funding worked out with the Finance Committee. Yeas, Hollingsworth, Johnson, Nath, Wildermuth, nay, Coiman, motion carried. That was the final motion that came out of that. Doesn't make it any clearer, but that's what it was. Basically where the money is coming from to be paid, which is, as Tyler mentioned, that's where it's coming from, the welfare fund, solid waste fund, and reserves. And then this is the discussion we're having now, is working out with the Finance Committee.
So then if I understand correctly, then your concept is to take that 400,000, 320,000, whatever it is, by the time townships get their money out of that, and divide that up amongst the communities by a per capita ratio?
no, I would just use a portion of it to repay the demo costs and have the rest in a designated account that other communities could, possibly have projects done in their areas as well, so that it's not just all being spent here.
But if we've got a tax forfeit property in another community, so you're saying that we can only use a small portion of that in that community? We can't use all of our resources to clean that up?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there'd be money in an account that could be used anywhere else in the county other than to pay for Central.
Or if Road and Bridge needed some extra money, or a highway for
Right,
some
or, yeah,
projects.
I mean, there could be other types of projects that need to be done, like Bruce was saying. I mean, whether it's just, a road project or a building project or a blight project, I mean, at least there'd be.
Economic development?
Right, yeah, there'd be funds available for a variety of things. But it just wouldn't all be going to something that, is,
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm absolutely open to this idea that all the other communities definitely need a share of some of this money too, but I'd like to see us pay back the cost for Central School first before we start this other account, just so we're not digging ourselves into a hole here. I think once that account's back up to where we're at present day, then we can go move forward building this account. And I'm open to starting that today, getting the verbiage of it starting today, that once that central school is paid off, then we could start this account. But I don't think we should start dividing money today.
So by having an account, you mean we're gonna have designated funds in this account that are designated only for this community? Only for this community? What do you do about the rural residents that aren't in the community? How
It'd
do
be
they
the
get their
same.
share of it? Again, we're in this together.
It'd be the same.
Yeah, I guess I didn't see it as being divided up by community or anything.
Well, then what's the 42% about?
It's the fact that this board has consistently overspent within the city of Pipestone for a number of years. And, the other communities have basically been shortchanged. And in order to, try to level the
County.
use of funds countywide, it just seems like a way of, at least trying to, for the time being, limit how much is being spent within the city of Pipestone versus the rest of the county.
You got another one, Steve?
Luke's got one already. Do you have yours, Luke?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm not saying to divide it up by township or city or whatever, because no, that's not practical, and it doesn't leave enough for anyone to get anything done.
Well, it's difficult to dump this in Tyler's lap and have to keep track of all these little details too.
Right.
But I totally agree with Luke. We've overspent in the city of Pipestone for years here, and there's been more than a couple $1 million overspent in Pipestone on roads and such.
I disagree with that. How can you assert that we've overspent in Pipestone? Where's the proof that we've overspent in Pipestone?
We could bring in Nick to provide that detail. Dave's provided it to us for years, and then Nick has continued.
Tyler, you got any insight for us at all? How have we overspent in Pipestone?
That is that's a road and bridge question. I don't have the details of how highways spent money in different parts of the county.
So we're going back to state aid, highway money is what we're talking about. Is that where the nucleus of this?
Dave
Concept
Halbersman
came from?
gave us all a letter. I don't know if you got one, Dan, but he says we spent $2.7 million more in the city of Pipestone than the state aid generated. So
Right.
that, up until last year, that was the number.
Yeah.
More than the city of Pipestone share should have been.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a sizable amount of money for a county with 10,000 people living in it. So, and that's done. But going forward, I think we have to try to keep things equal and fair in the communities.
And look at it as though we're all one
One of
unit.
our members talk about this as a county problem, and yes, it is a county problem, but it's been dumped on us by people in the city of Pipestone, the leadership in the community of Pipestone. And it's a huge problem. And the rest of the county's not happy about it. Neither am I, but we have to live with it. So I think we have to think about this a little more and come up with some sort of a solution. If we're going to spend $850,000 in Pipestone on a project here, I think we have to look at, and if we have to wait till it's paid back, fine. But at some point, we have to make it fair for the rest of the communities in the county.
Right.
And I don't know exactly how we're going to do that, but I think we have to maybe have more discussion about it.
And not just the communities, but all the residents, because not all of our residents in Pipestone live in a township, in a
Some
city
of the
or a
townships
village.
would like to have some help with some projects too.
Sure. And that's where we've got county money that's used for rural blacktops. And we don't split it out saying, well, Etna Township's only going to get X number of dollars because it's Etna Township. No, it's part of the county's responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
But fortunately, we have plenty of time, because this
We won't be
isn't
getting any
something
money
we
for a
need to
year or two
resolve
anyway.
today.
That's right.
We got, obviously,
I mean, I will say from my side of it, it's nice to have this discussion because I have a better insight of exactly what every board member's looking for. Because coming into today, I didn't really know what everybody's feelings on this was, and I have some direction to go back and just do some thinking and looking into just sort of the accounting aspect of it, but not necessarily legality, because I know we can do that. Just thinking of different ways that we could try to satisfy everybody's requests for something like this, because I'm definitely not opposed to it. But coming into today's meeting, I'd like having a discussion just so we can kind of understand where everybody wants to go with these kind of funds, so that we can get a better understanding. That's what I'm just happy with, getting a little bit better understanding of what everybody's thinking. But yeah, I definitely do not think that's something that we need to pass today. We just need to have some more discussion. I think that's just a good first discussion for it, so.
And is the concept still that we have separate accounts? You got X number of dollars in this account for
Right.
Jasper, or X number of dollars in the account for Trotsky? How does that work?
From what my understanding, from what Lucas said, is that it would be, whether it's 43%, whatever portion of that fund, or if we would just pay back all of the central school demolition costs first, however we want to decide to do that. But then the separate pot of money is just one pot of money that can only be requested by cities or townships outside of the city of Pipestone. Am I correct?
Right.
So it'd be one pot of money, and it wouldn't be set by population or anything besides the fact that the city of Pipestone wouldn't be able to touch it.
Correct.
That's my understanding of it. Whether that's how it ends up, I just want to make sure we all, that's kind of where I'm coming with it. That's where I feel. Obviously, there's a lot of bigger discussions on it, whether we do it right away, when we start seeing an increase, when that increase actually occurs, how we'd go about it. I mean, there's a lot of details that we need to work out, but that's my understanding of the broad overview of how we're kind of coming at the end of the discussion here, so.
That's accurate.
Well, I think anybody that's ridden up and down the main street of Pipestone and through the alleys behind the main street buildings in the city of Pipestone, you have to be blind not to realize that this isn't the first problem we're gonna have here. These are gonna continue to go on and on here, and it's gonna be something the board's gonna have to deal with for a long time.
And also in the other communities in this town. You can drive up and down the back alleys and streets of every community in this town and see there's areas that need attention.
Of varying degrees.
And again, back to the concept of tax forfeit properties. Some of these properties, it's assumed are gonna have a positive value. Not all of them have positive values.
Right.
Right, yeah, the statutes are written in a very, how do I want to, rose-colored glasses of, yes, the counties are going to be making money off these properties, but I will say that we lose money consistently. I did run one report that the total amount of money that we spent on forfeited property since I've been here, so that would have been in 2013, and this includes all the costs that we've had so far with the demolition of the central school to Bolton and Bank. We spent just shy of $100,000. So we're looking at roughly $20,000 per year currently of what we have. And obviously, yes, a large majority of that has gone in towards Pipestone, but that's strictly because of central school. I mean, that's going to be
Say probably a pretty high percentage of that is strictly central school.
correct. And I was put that. I personally feel the central school is a little different because of all the health hazards, the scope of the project, and the fact that it's the county's responsibility. And it's just really hard to get out of underneath the rock like that. It's definitely not something that I personally want to be doing, but I feel that statutorily it's very clear that it's our responsibility.
And to be splitting hairs of whether it was this school district or this school district, again, it's a Pipestone County problem.
I understand that, but it's a hard pill to swallow for the other 3 school districts in the county.
Sure it is. I think maybe to give us a little more insight as well, too, recently down at Jackson, we had our AMC District 8 meeting. There's a report there from the other counties, and a lot of the discussion was wind production tax money and where that money is going to. Do you recall, Steve, some of the reports they gave? Because the other counties also have the same trepidation about getting too reliant on this. So some are using it strictly for levy reduction.
Yeah. Lincoln is using theirs to expand their broadband, as theirs is increasing. That's a huge project they bonded for up there. A lot of them were saying levy reduction primarily. And, along with that, they said too, remember one of the ideas that was floated in their legislative forum was blighted property that's becoming county problems. I didn't see that it gathered a whole lot of traction when the list came through of the top priorities, but that was on AMC's list, because it is. And we sit here and raise our hand and say, yes, it's happening to us to the tune of over $800,000 to all the taxpayers. So it is important to Pipestone County.
And that's an issue that we've addressed the last 4 years, and have gotten nowhere on it when we started dealing with this problem.
Another thing to remember is just, the state, they giveth and they taketh away. And that's happened so much in the past with our county program aid. I mean, it's only been within the last 2 years that we've seen an increase. Before that, I remember was reading about this, and there was discussion, I can't remember the legislators, but they're getting this amount of wind production money, why do they need this county program aid? So it's already being, in some circles, associated back to, well, they're getting this, so why do they need that much?
And I do believe that was the motivation behind us taking that huge cut in our county program aid. I mean, we took, wasn't it 70%, you guys remember, wasn't it 70%?
Sounds like 172,000, I think, in 2016, wasn't it? It was just,
It was well over, it used to be well over $1 million around a decade ago, and we were down to 170.
1.2?
Yep.
Yep.
it's just gone down ever since, and really hammered us a couple of years ago. Then you were having, over 10% levy increases in those years. Because we had to make it up, and you were still getting that wind tower money that we're getting too. So we're using that as levy reduction, but it just wasn't enough to offset the loss in program aid we were getting.
Yes.
And that hurts a lot when you have a county this size.
Didn't some of the other counties in District 8 say that they have set aside a portion of their wind production tax for levy reduction, but not all of it? They set a portion of the wind, and then they use the
Some
other
are using
for-
it for capital projects.
Yeah, the type of thing, again, because if you could call it discretionary money, it's funding that if you absolutely didn't have it, you could maybe wait a little bit on it. So it's not tied right strictly to levy. So things such as economic development or, I don't know, what are some of the other examples they use? Where somebody used it for equipment for their roads? Yeah.
Road projects.
And specific road projects, road improvement projects. So this all, ties in with our same discussion we had about the aggregate tax, the wheelage tax, all the different areas we're trying to come up with funding to try to take care of our community needs. Community being the entire county of Pipestone community. So yeah, it is, certainly is a very difficult thing to be able to work through, to make sure that we're equitable with it. But yes, also good stewards of this money, setting this money aside in an account and not touching it, like we've done with this Health and Human Services Fund for how many years it's been sitting there. That really has not been, it hasn't been the wisest use of that money, has it?
Well, I don't know about necessarily the wisest. I guess, yeah, it was, at the time, the board felt that it would be best to, instead of putting all the leftover funds for the buy-in that we had in that account or in that fund, at that time, instead of putting it in the general fund, to leave it there in case we had a large project as kind of a rainy day fund. And obviously, that's kind of what we're using it as. So it's being used as intended, what we intended it to be used for. It is being used for that. Obviously, we can talk for hours on whether it's the best use of funds or not, but I would definitely, there's nothing wrong with having some money set aside for unexpected projects. And I have no problem with saving some money for certain things. I just don't want to be saving hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for no real reason when we don't know how we can do it, when we already have costs around the county that we know we could be spending that money on. That's where I'm coming from. I'm completely okay with saving some money. I just want to have it set in stone and making sure we're actually utilizing that money instead of just sitting there and not using it, and then we're going to be levying money on the back of the taxpayers when we have possible money. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, because tax forfeited properties are not going away. It's going to be a headache in the county level, I feel, moving forward. And it's something that statutorily it got put on the counties, and that's not going to be changing anytime soon. So, and it's definitely not just Pipestone County. It's a statewide problem that a lot of other counties have had millions of dollar projects, hundreds and thousands of dollar projects such as these, and it definitely is a burden to the counties at this point. So it's definitely something that we have to plan out. It's not an easy discussion to have, and it's definitely a balancing game that we have to play. What's best interest for the taxpayers. So I feel like this is a good discussion, and I think we have some direction, and I think we just have to continue these discussions because they are sensitive, and it does have a lot of financial implications in the long run. So I think that this is a good starting point for this. So
You understand that the state auditor also has opinions and guidelines on how much you can have in reserves, because you talked about the fact that it's not correct to have a huge reserve and still be levying your people.
no, exactly. I mean, it's not, if to have millions and millions of dollars unassigned funds with no reason to have that money and then turn around and not spend it and just keep levying people, that's definitely not Nobody wants to see that. That goes against county government. That goes against government in general, because then that's just the definition of overtaxation. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you can't set aside funds for items that you know for a fact are going to be coming up in the future.
And these would be in a reserve fund, an undesignated fund? What is the terminology used for those monies?
So, I mean, well, you have restricted funds. Restricted funds come directly from the state, or not even from the state, from an outside source that we have to spend on a given project. So the $170,000 that we received for the beef barn donation, for instance, those are restricted funds because they came to the county for a restricted purpose. Assigned funds, on the other hand, are declarations by the board of how we can spend this pot of money. So an example would be the solid waste fund that we have, that would be the $36 recycling fees. That can only be spent on solid waste or recycling type items. That's completely board driven. That can be assigned and then unassigned as well. So I mean, you could actually, if you wanted, I'm not saying that this is what you should do, say the solid waste money, you could undesignate that and just put that into unassigned and spend it on anything that you want. That's a board decision. I guess that's not something that I recommend by any means, but it is an option. That's just the difference between a restriction and an assignment. And then the other thing would be the fund balance that you're discussing that the state auditors relate to is the unassigned balance, which is the pot of money that we have that we could theoretically go out and spend on projects throughout the county however we want, because it's just a pot of money that we can use to cover our costs, so on and so forth. Yep.
We talked about some of the counties using it for their broadband, and our broadband with Woodstock Telephone taking the lead on this, we've got that pretty well handled, I believe, don't we? Is that kind of the consensus, that we're in good shape on that, or is there still monies that we might need to contribute?
There's gonna be pockets where there's not gonna be good coverage. You know, I mean, we're putting in a wireless system. It's not like rock.
Well, it's a hybrid part, you know. So there might be a need there as well, again, for some of those outlying areas where we can't get fiber optic too.
Correct.
And again, economic development, certainly this would make sense to be able to have some reserve funds that could be used for various promotion. You know, we talk about the need for economic development in the county, obviously, but it has to come from somewhere.
Correct.
Any other thoughts?
I don't think there's any risk of just accumulating money for no intended purpose, because, I mean, considering that we don't currently levy much for, like, any contribution to the state aid system or, you know, roads, I mean, we really don't levy much for roads in general, I mean, other than maintenance. So there, I mean, there's plenty of needs out there besides blighted properties and other things. It's just, as you know, there's never enough funds to address all the needs.
How's our blighted list looking, Tyler? Just
For instance, well, this year we had 10 forfeit. It's definitely been varying. You know, one year we'll have 15, one year we'll have 2 or 3. You know, I mean, it just kind of depends on how it falls. Definitely the housing crisis several years ago played a large role in how many properties are getting back now. I guess I don't necessarily see that continuing well into the future, but you never know. I mean, it kind of goes along with the economy. You know,
2 or 3 in Trotsky that I've been watching, and I don't know if any of those are on the list this year.
They're not on the list this year, but they are going to, I believe they're due to forfeit next year. If not next year, the year after that.
They just took care of one there, just.
Correct. Yes. So, I mean, it's definitely, it's hard to put a number on it per year, roughly what we're going to have. You know, I mean, definitely, I mean, that list of delinquents is hundreds of parcels long. So it's hard to do research on every single one and how much it would cost the county, so on and so forth. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of unknowns with forfeiture properties, because not only the owner could step in, but if there's a mortgage, so on and so forth, banks could step in and pay off the delinquent taxes as well. So there's definitely a lot of unknown variables that relate to that. But as Bruce mentioned, I mean, there's some parcels that could be coming in the future that could cost some money for the county, whether there's health hazards, so on and so forth. it's my argument and my stance that we should get those properties back in the tax rolls as cheaply as possible. Obviously, we don't want to have just a bunch of hazardous parcels out there countywide, and that's when I think we'll have to kind of dive into that. But other than that, I think that it's the best interest of the county to get them off of our books and off of our insurance as cheaply as possible and get them back in the tax rolls. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
If I understand correctly, then 2 weeks from today, then on the 27th of November, you'll be coming to us with a list of properties that are due to be disposed of, so we have to set a minimum price on those, is that correct?
Correct. That's the meeting that we're going to actually get them all approved for sale, set the basic minimum price. I know the city of Pipestone is interested in a couple of parcels here in town, so that meeting, it would be up to the board to determine what they want to do with it, whether they want to give it to the city or have the city pay a price, so on and so forth. That is the meeting, and then the auction itself, I had tentatively scheduled for the month following that, so.
Sometimes toward the end of December is going to be the actual auction,
Tentatively, I have that December 27th.
7th,
Yep, because that is something that I do like to get done before the year end.
Thursday, okay.
Yep.
So yeah, like I said, this tax force property is not going to go away. It's an ongoing.
Sadly, no. I mean, it's definitely something that's ongoing. It's sadly there's people that things happen in their lives, financially, that they have too many burdens, and this is the things that kind of come from that. So.
Very good. Well, should we move on with the agenda, then, gentlemen?
Have a good day.
Any further discussion on this? I don't want to cut the discussion short, so.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you, Tyler. In other business then, Steve, you got some information on cafeteria plan resolution?
Yep. Kathy's got that for you.
Morning, Kathy.
So I have the resolution 59-3418 Pipestone County Benefit Contributions and Cafeteria Plan Arrangement. And this is something that we do every year. It's defining the county's contribution and how that's paid out to employees for their insurance benefits. Some of the changes this year is just we upped the life insurance, so you can see the required minimum participation that is listed there. The funding, it does get a little bit complicated explaining how it's funded, but it's kind of broken down into three pieces here. So under A, it tells how much on an annual basis employees get from the county. So you can see there that people on the single plan get $88.20 per year. Family plan, they get $12,660. In section B, it lists how the HRA, which is a VEBA, or an HSA contributions are given out. So you have the $1,350 for singles, given on or around January 10th. And then the $2,700 for families, given on or around January 10th. Then you have C, which is the remaining monthly contribution. So if you recall, you guys set the contributions at $735 for single and $1,055 for family. That had those HRA or VEBA and HSA contributions built into them. So once you pull out those annual amounts, the $622.50 is what employees get each month towards their premiums, and $830 towards premiums for family coverage. So that's listed there under C. And then it just has how employees elect these benefits and what benefits are available. So they can, if there is any leftover county contribution money, they can use that towards group dental coverage, life, voluntary life insurance, vision, long-term disability, AFLAC, flexible spending accounts, or their own contribution to HSAs. We no longer allow cash out, so all employees do have to elect some kind of optional benefit with any leftover county contribution money. And then any employees that would start mid-year would get a prorated amount into their accounts. They wouldn't get the full $1,350 or $2,700. They get prorated towards the number of months remaining for the year.
Okay, so do I assume then that this is your recommendation that we approve this resolution as you've got it presented to us?
Correct. This was reviewed by Scott Wold. He's a benefits attorney, so it was legally reviewed as well.
Our insurance committee's had a chance to look at the details of this, okay? Your recommendation as the committee?
Mr. Chair, I'd move for approval.
Okay,
And second.
moved and seconded for approval of this resolution number 593418. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
And opposed, the same. Passes unanimously. Thank you for your hard work.
Yes, thank you. And then for my personnel, I don't really have anything today. I thought I would have a new employee, but we're still working on our finalists for full-time jailer dispatcher position. So hopefully by next board meeting, I'll have an announcement there, so.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Steve, do you have any other business?
Yes, action on the letter of support for Head Start is in your packet as well. After Ms. Pennick's report last week, she requested a letter of support, which she did send us a template, so I did work with that and have that in front of you for action. Request the chairman's signature when approved.
Very good.
Move for approval.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the letter of support then for Lori Gunnick's request. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, the same. Thank you. Did we take official action then on moving that January 2nd meeting?
We have not taken official action.
Okay. We all understand the necessity of it. I would look for a motion to move the meeting from January 1st to January 2nd because of the holiday.
Moved.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Thank you. And you said the Christmas one, we already did take formal action on that previously?
Yes.
Okay. So then, the only thing we got left then is just the announcement of our upcoming meetings. We got the AMC Annual Conference then, December 2nd and 4th in Bloomington. Also, I see we all got the invitation that December 2nd, we've got the hospital board Christmas program as well, too. And then also the County Truth and Taxation meeting on December 10th. Any further announcements, Steve?
Mr. Chairman, you can add County Christmas Party will be December 17th, Monday night at the Hatfield Roadhouse. More information and menu items will be coming out soon. So jot that down for your
Calendar.
social activities for the month of December.
Very good. Would entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.